Welcome to In the C-Suite, Princeton TV's top 10 most viewed online shows, the go-to resource for business owners and entrepreneurs. Tips and tools from C-level executives and business leaders, featuring this week's special guest, Joe Pardo, business consultant.
Hosted by Leontyne Anglin.
You're watching In the C-Suite on Princeton Community Television.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to In the C-Suite, where we bring you tips, tools, and resources for small business owners, entrepreneurs, and other professionals who are thinking about starting their own businesses. I'm your host, Leontyne Anglin, and we have a phenomenal guest on deck today. They call him Super Joe Pardo, and I'm going to call him Super Joe, too. He's a business consultant. He has worked with multi-million-dollar companies, and now he's kind of transformed that into a business consulting practice. But we have him here today to talk about a number of initiatives that he has underway. So I'm going to jump right into it and welcome Joe to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Super Joe Pardo is here.
In Princeton. I've only been to Princeton one other time before.
Really?
Yes.
Well, welcome.
I'm happy to be here.
Welcome, welcome. I'm excited about this. I'm going to give a little bit of a history and how we met. You happen to be, in addition to a number of other things, the host of the Mid-Atlantic Podcast Conference. I happened to be there for the first time. It was phenomenal, by the way. It was great to be in a room with other podcasters. I actually started out in podcasting, and so it was great to kind of be there. I had a chance to connect, and I was excited to try to figure out how we could work our schedules to get you here. Not only do you do the MapCon, but you also do DreamCon. I'm going to hype that up a little bit, too, because you shared with me that there's some fundraising initiatives, and that's a big thing for me. So let's go ahead and have you can start where you want, but let's have people get a little bit of your professional background, maybe even starting with your love of Disney. Let's start there. Let's talk about that a little bit. You're an official Disney head. Let's talk about that.
I am. So I grew up going to Disney, and I fell in love with the idea of like the processes, the magic, and how like just everything comes together to create that experience for people. And as I got older and got into my family's business, that's where like it all kind of made sense, and I put all the pieces together. So Disney's like, that's a love and a passion of mine. I run the races down there. I love it.
Yeah, and I know that you told me. Let's talk a little bit about your DJing. I'm gonna jump around a little bit because it just jumped into my head. I don't want to forget that. In addition to some of the other things, let's talk about the DJing, kind of how that morphed into this trilogy, I'm going to call it, of self-development books that you're working on. Let's talk about the DJing piece a little bit, Joe.
So there was two things I wanted to be when I was growing up. First was a child psychologist at the age of 6, and the second thing was a DJ at the age of 10. By the age of 17, I met the right people to put me in that space. So I got to learn all the DJing skills and make it really into what I wanted, which is mashup DJing. So if many years later, like 10 years into DJing, I finally put together my first album, and it's called Adventuratorium. It took 3 months to put together. It's Disney music mashed up with hip-hop instrumentals to tell the story of Pixar's Up. It's 2 CDs, and we raised money with that when the original CDs came out for Give Kids the World, which work with Make-A-Wish Foundation down in Florida. Like when the wish is to go to Disney, that's where they go.
I love that. Outside of the business things that I do, I'm a huge volunteer. So I wanted to make sure that I shine a light on that. And thank you for doing that. And I know that you have DreamCons coming up. So this is something that you do. Is it an annual thing?
It's been. So we started out, as an anniversary show or anniversary event for the Dreamers podcast, which is the podcast I started shortly after doing my first DJ album. And we raised money for the first 3 years. We've done it for Give Kids the World. We've raised close to $3,000. It was small in a house party. Then it was a little like another house party. Then we had an event at where we held MapCon at Mid-Atlantic Podcast Conference. So it was really awesome. We play minute to win it games. So like I donate $10 for every person that completes the minute to win it game, and from there, that's people just keep piling on the cash, and before you know it, you're at a significant amount of money.
Well, I love it, and anything that anybody can do. I love when people get creative and thinking about ways that they could just pull their local friends and colleagues together to kind of support organizations. So that's my shameless plug for you. Thank you for doing
Well,
that.
thank you.
So let's go back to this Disney thing, because that fascinated me when you and I started to chat, and talk about how you went from that into podcasting, because that kind of happened. It was a happenstance with podcasting. So let's talk a little bit about that. I think that's an interesting story.
Yeah, so I never really listened, I found out about my first podcast back in 2005. I didn't start listening to that podcast, which was a Disney podcast, shock surprise, and until 2006, and I became a super fan of the show, and they had reunion meetups and things like that down at Disney, and it was great, and they raised money for Give Kids the World, and it really helped inspire a lot of things. When I came time to do the album, that was when I started to reach out to other Disney podcasts, because I was like, it's a Disney music album, it's basically Up the musical.
Right.
So that's when I reached out to all these Disney podcasts, and I started getting interviewed, and I was like, man, I really enjoy this. This is fun. And that's about 2 months after the album went, or no, 1 month after the album went live. That's when I started up my first podcast, Streamers Podcast.
Wow, and now that was how many years ago now?
3.5 years ago.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fantastic. And so did you know when you were kind of just dabbling into it that you were going to do it for this long? Is it something that caught on with you as you started to go, or is it something else that kind of drives you to keep it going?
So, I mean, hey, I've had my ups and downs as far as how in love I am with all of it. Depends on what I have going on.
I get it.
When I started out, I was super all about it. I had the technology background, the business background, the audio background with DJing, and I was interviewing all kinds of people. I had made a whole list. I mean, as the story goes, when I found out about the idea to start the show, I was on a plane to Disney World. As soon as the plane landed, I registered the domain name, the Twitter handle, and the Facebook page before we got to the rental car.
Just jumped right on it.
Yeah, and 2 weeks later, I had my first episode out. So did I know that was going to last as long? I think overall I wanted it to, and I think that, different challenges come up. But I mean, I've released at least one episode every single week since then, as much as 5 episodes a week for a short, for
Wow.
3 or 4 months. It was crazy, but I had to take, step down so I could put my books together, because I knew I wanted to write books and I knew I wanted to do speaking, but I also knew that doing a podcast 5 days a week is really tough to keep that up.
Oh, there's a lot behind it, and I think, as podcasters, we kind of know that, but I don't think the people who are listening realize all the work that goes into it. But let's talk about the books, because especially the 31 Life-Changing Concepts, that one is really popular. I think it's even been featured in Huffington Post. Talk about how you went from the podcast and where the book kind of came out, because after you've done that, you kind of did a couple other things. So let's talk about that.
Yeah. So the book was written pretty quickly. It's a book all about 31 concepts that I use in my life and I try to live by and help other people with. Right, so writing the book was very quickly because it was an outline,
right.
And then from there I was like, all right, well, I personally don't read a whole lot of books. I like to say I read people, because I have so many conversations, and having a podcast really helped accelerate that process for me. So I was like, I want to write a book that's short, to the point, and has a lot of pictures in it. I was like, I'm not an artist, but I'm going to pretend that I am one, because I want to show the power of what you can do when you're not something.
You know why I loved it? As we were looking, and you can hold the book up too, so people can kind of see. You know what I loved about it? It's kind of the book for a person who doesn't write books, right? And what I mean by that is it's like what we were talking about. Flip through it a little bit. I want people to see. It's such an easy read.
Very large
Right?
text, which I've gotten a lot of great feedback on. The pictures are huge. It's in black and white. The original was in color, but color's super expensive.
Let's talk about the cost. That's right.
Yeah,
Exactly.
so that was kind of short-lived, but the book has been pretty successful for me, and well received by many people as for life, but as well as for business. The Huffington Post top recommended business book. So,
and the thing about it that I like, it's content. It's not design. It's content. If the content is there, that's what makes the difference.
Yeah,
right? As long as
absolutely.
it's talking about something. What about Dream Big and Win? How did you go from that to that next one? Let's talk a little bit about that.
So at the time, I was doing a lot of talks at schools about dreaming, because I had the Dreamers podcast and
right.
all that made a lot of sense. So I was like, I need to take what I've been telling people and put it into a book. But I wanted to do a book that was similar style to the 31 Life-Changing Concepts, but I didn't really want to color in everything again. So I was like, you know what, let's make it a coloring book. So the words, the idea behind the coloring is to get you in the frame of mind for dreaming. If you're not a child, it gets you back in that frame of mind. If you are a child, it's just fun. It's written in such a way that it's designed for you to just consume it and move on, and not have to like, make an event out of reading it.
Right,
yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, definitely.
And I think what I think is perfect about it is that it's a hybrid of the content and the coloring, because that's just so everything right now for adults.
Yeah, there's a pretty big market.
It's a big
for adult coloring books.
But even think about for professionals. Sometimes we're always trying to figure out ways to kind of unwind. Coloring is a way to do that.
Yes.
So you're kind of gaining that information, but also kind of just relaxing too. Because that's something, and that's a great segue into the business part of this, because this is going to go by pretty quickly. I wanted to bring you here for a specific reason. Entrepreneurs are working around the clock. That's just kind of what we do. So on the second half of this show, I want to make sure that we talk about destressifying, right? That's the word we're going to use today. But also, I want you, if you don't mind, I want you on the second half of the show to give some tips, some really specific tips on how entrepreneurs can kind of streamline the complex processes that we kind of go through day in and day out. And so we'll save for then. But I want people to know that you've got a pretty strong background in the business industry. Your family had if I'm not mistaken, $10 million, $100 million. Let's get the extra zero on there. $100 million business that they were running. So you were eat, drinking, and sleep in that business. I want people to know that there's some substance there. Talk a little bit about that business background that you have, and then we'll morph into the second half of the show, Joe.
Fourth generation entrepreneur / business owner. The business was started by my great grandfather, my grandfather, and my dad. When my dad was quite young at the time, that was the Pardo Truck Service Parts. It was located out of Sewell, New Jersey, originally Deptford, New Jersey. And that was the main business of the hub, which was actually a total of 5 businesses that equate to that $100 million value. And what, I grew up starting at the age of 6 there, sweeping floors, counting inventory, being in my grandfather's office, doing those, those things, learning the building blocks of what goes on in the business. So it was a number of years. I was there from the age of 6 till I was 27 years old. And towards the end, I got more involved I went from, working in the warehouse to working at the counter, dealing with customers, to salesmanship, to the IT, like all the IT stuff, because I'm an IT guy. I love technology, running the servers and that such, to running operations and having my fingers in pretty much every facet of the business. The big thing that I did while I was there towards the end was we were running at like almost $6 million in inventory. And, at the time I'm like, okay, well, we need to get this down, because we're doing lots of business, but it's not there.
All the efficiencies.
Our numbers aren't in the right balance because of that. So it was like, let's get it down. In 2 years, we went from $6 million down to just under $3 million, and we still bought $1 million a month in inventory. That's just for the one business, not including the other 4.
Yeah. When you told me that, I wanted to make sure that I highlighted that, because I didn't want to just say, oh yeah, he's a business consultant. Because sometimes people don't know what you have as that framework underneath it. So I want them to know, no, Joe knows how to kind of run a large-scale company. And then I think where the 10 million was in my head is we were talking about prospective clients for you. People that have businesses somewhere within the $10 million and under range. When we come back, we're going to talk about a couple of those tips that we shared. The time is flying, everybody. Thank you for tuning in. We're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back with Super Joe Pardo.
Hey, I'm Joe Pardo, and let me tell you a little bit about myself. In 1999, my grandfather bought all this land to build this building to be a super warehouse and central hub for Pardo's Truck Service Parts. At the time, we had 8 or 9 locations in 2000 when it opened. In In 2014, I took my last steps out of the door behind me and didn't come back. This is the studio that it all started in. When I started the Dreamers podcast 3 years ago while on a plane ride to Disney World to run a half 5K thing. 3 years later, I've been able to help people from around the world with their businesses, entrepreneurs and business owners alike. I love business and I love talking about business so much that I wanted to create a platform for business owners like you to check out every single day to be reminded about the little things that you can do to improve your business vastly. Thanks for checking out this video. Contact me at superjoepardo.com. Whatever it is, just make sure that you reach out because I want to hear from you.
Video marketing can skyrocket traffic to your website and your business. From eye-catching promotional ads and client testimonial to webinar training series that showcase your expertise. Give your brand a boost. Visit stagingexecs.com today. Get your show on the air. Get your business on the map. And now, back to the show.
We are back here in the C-suite with a phenomenal guest. We got Super Joe Pardo in the house today. So Joe, on the other side of the break, we were just talking about your significant business experience. You started out at the age of 6, up to 27. That is a lot of experience, and I'm sure that was a family legacy. I think you said 4th generation, and we could probably do a whole sidebar show on succession planning and what that looks like. But I would love for you to share a couple of tips. I want to go back to what I started at the top of the show. We spend so much time working. I mean, literally, if you're running your own thing. And I think we sometimes have made processes so complex, maybe because we're either in it too much or we need to hire or form some of it out. Couple of tips that you could share specifically to help entrepreneurs streamline their businesses. What's the first one you'd like to share?
Okay, the first one is know your numbers, right? Like, so everyone says that, but when I talk about know your numbers, it's not just about the ones that everyone knows, which is like ROI, revenue, profit, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
Like, that's great. Everyone should know that. The numbers I'm talking about are the numbers that, how long does it take to pick a part? How long does it take for a customer to stand around? These are the kind of numbers that can give you those as they say in the corporate world, key performance indicators that you're going to be able to set up and design for yourself, and then you can start to track. You track it, and then you can start to bring those numbers down into a more acceptable range. How long are the customers standing around? How long is your employees standing around? How long does it take for a shelf to get restocked or anything? How many steps does it take? Because time is money. So if it takes an extra 10 seconds, but you're doing that process 10 times or 100 times a day, 10 times 100, you're at 1,000 seconds.
Wow.
And that's just one day.
That's one day. And you know what? Think about the ramifications of not getting those numbers right? You don't even think about. So when you look at those numbers, do you find that the entrepreneurs or the business owners or whoever it is that you're working with really step back and say, wow, I wasn't really paying attention to that stuff? Or do you find that they were? I don't think a lot of people are looking at those numbers, are they?
It depends. So, a lot of times we get caught up in we got to get this done. It's whatever's right in front of us.
Right.
I've been there. I've seen the stress. I've experienced the stress. And that stress gives us the tunnel vision. It's like, yeah, is it perfect? No, but we're getting it done. And so my counter to that argument would be, it's like, are you building a business or are you building a hobby?
Yeah.
One or the other. Pick it, right?
I'm glad you brought that up. So do you come at it from different angles, whether you're talking to a startup versus a scale-up, if you know what I mean by that? Or do you really, it doesn't matter who it is, you kind of start out with that one-size-fits-all approach when you're getting started with people?
Definitely not. So I think that, while sales are super important and we need to focus on that when we're getting started, it comes to a certain point where you've matured to the point where you need to grow your profit margin, because if you're not growing, you're dying.
Right.
And it's super, super important for you to be like, okay, well, if we can save 30 seconds in this process or a minute here, and you multiply that out, like you could save all this time, that's how you're going to get to that next level, right? That's how you're going to say, okay, well, if I have the inventory lined up like this instead of kind of all over the place, maybe not like not in sequential order, but just like your different lines are like kind of not, they don't make sense where they're at.
Yeah.
That's where you can get into like really hyper focusing your processes. So, but it all starts with knowing your numbers.
Yeah.
It also destressify you as well, because if you're not guessing. So, and that goes more towards the like the basic numbers, the ones that everyone knows, the profit revenue, you know, what's your bills for the month and,
Right.
and expenses and all that. So those are the things where it's like that. If you know those numbers, you can destressify yourself really quick. If you start, you know, you get that next level, you're like, I'm going to bill out these other numbers and figure out like, where's this inventory going? How long is it sitting on the shelf? Blah, 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 blah. That's where you can take everything to the next level.
I like it, and that's why I wanted to kind of highlight. I want people to know it's, you know, it's not one size fits all. You really are going to customize. You got to work with the customers where they are. Second tip.
So consistency. So I was, you know, when it comes to consistency in your business, it's not just for you, it's for the customer, it's for your own team members, right? The people that are making all this happen. They need a consistent experience every single time. You know, it's like why do you go to a restaurant? It's not because they have the most amazing food, it's because they have the same food every single time and it's consistent. You need to make those processes consistent, whatever that means for you. And whatever it would mean for your customers in whatever industry you're in. It comes down to figuring out the science and the numbers to get it, to make it consistent.
What kinds of things do people need to bring with them when they're getting ready to sit down and work on getting those numbers together, looking at consistency? What kinds of things do people need to start figuring out? You know what, let me pull these things together before I go meet with Joe.
So the first thing would be an open mind, right? Because we might think that, you know, and a lot of times, like, people think they know, but computers really know. So, like, if you think that you're like, oh, you know, I saw Leontyne in the store yesterday, but really it was 6 weeks ago, the computer knows that. You think you know that. Right. You know, those are the types of things where it's like, you have to have an open mind of, like, what is going to the baseline going to look like. And that open mind will also help you deal with the ramifications of, oh, we really didn't know. or it wasn't what we thought or what we expected it to be. Right. So open mind is definitely number one. And number two is getting a baseline for the numbers. Because before you're trying to solve the problem, you have to actually figure out, like, okay, we have to figure out what the problem is, because you might not, there's a lot of unknown unknowns in business. Right. Like, people think that they know, and they, when they come to me as a consultant, they're like, okay, well, these are the problems I have. I'm like, great, that's awesome. One of the things that I do is I actually go to their business for 3 days and to find those other things that's like, these are the things that you didn't even realize were going on, and we can fix them. Whether it's a technology-based thing, an inventory-based thing, a process-based thing, a team members-based thing, those are the types of things that you're just not going to see, you know, because you're too close to the situation.
I had to bring that up because I like the fact that you're not doing this by phone. Like, this is not a virtual.
Well, some of it is,
but you know what I mean. You're going in there. You're physically 3 days. You can uncover a lot of different things in 3 days, literally on the ground. So I wanted to make sure that people knew that. Again, I'm looking for things that differentiate Super Joe Pardo. There's a lot of, let's be real with this, there are a lot of business consultants out here. So when I bring people on the show, I want people to know that I reached out to you for a specific reason, and I think that's a big deal. I think that's a really big deal. We got a couple more minutes. Any bonus tips? You got anything else that you could share?
So the other thing I would say is, if you want to de-stressify yourself, if you want to get your processes in order, scheduling is super, super, super important. And a lot of people put that on the back burner. They think they're really good at scheduling, or maybe they're just not giving enough attention to the scheduling. Those types of things take time to get good at.
Clarify what you mean. Scheduling what?
Scheduling, how often am I meeting with my teammates? How often are we meeting together?
Yep.
How often am I going to be in meetings? And how well am I announcing that to my team? Is that shared information? Is some form of it shared so that they can see it, so everybody's on the same page? And that goes right back into consistency, right? Like, if everyone knows, like, if I check the calendar, so, you know, Joe Pardo is going to be here, hey, he's got a 15-minute slot here, and he's going to be in the building. Let me see if I can, you know, get in there. How
often can things go out of whack when people aren't on the same page? Even in a small company, small or large. But what's the downward spiral look like when things don't get on the same page and that scheduling doesn't happen, right? Talk about that. I think that's a big deal, and I think people may kind of miss out on that. The people that are in the meetings are figuring out, okay, I know where I need to be. But I think you're right. I think it does make sense for everybody that's involved to kind of know what's going on, what the landscape looks like.
I think you get into that realm of like, we're doing it the best we can to just get the result that we're looking for. And the result that we're looking for may not be up here. It's it's down here, but it could be up here. So I think you just get kind of complacent in that, like, oh, this is just the way it is. And the thing is with business and the pressure is like, what people don't understand that don't have a business, what they don't understand is as the walls can close in on you very, very quickly as a business owner, and I've seen it, I've experienced it, I've lived it, and it can get that way in a hurry when you let little things go, because they turn into big things. It's just like a relationship in life. I mean, I talk about life in my books, but my next book is coming up, and that's a business book, and focused on the that part of like that business and life and how they go back and forth, because a lot of business owners live their business. And I think that it's really, really important from a destressifying system or part to build your business for your lifestyle, not your lifestyle for your business.
Yeah, well, you just said it a couple seconds ago. We live our businesses. I don't think that's the way it was supposed to be. I don't think when we decided to start our own businesses, that we realized we were actually going to live this, that we were literally going to 24/7 eat, drink, and sleep, figuring out if we're not working on it, we're thinking about what we need to be doing. So you talked about your new book that's coming out, and I know you're close. I know you're close to wrapping that up. Talk a little bit about the book so we can create the buzz for it now.
Yeah.
Excited about this new book coming out.
It'll be done soon, really soon.
Yeah.
So it's called Sales Will Not Save Your Business, Focus on the Top. And TOP stands for Team, Offer, and Process. It's in the heart of where I have these books, where it's short and to the point, and it's based for people who own businesses or even managers, really, who are looking for a better way to build out these processes, because everything it needs to be built into a process in order for you to take things and grow them, right? Because if a lot of times, like, we get in that rut of, I'll just do it myself.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, that's great until you're sick, or till you're not able to do it anymore, or you're ready to grow for to provide for more people.
Right. I like it. And it's a natural segue for the trilogy, excuse me, but also it's a kind of a tool. It's kind of a tool that I think people will be able to use whether they're working with you or not, so they can kind of take Super Joe with them, even if they're not able to work with you. How can people get in touch with you as we start to wind down the show, Joe?
SuperJoePardo.com.
Okay.
Everything is there.
Everything is there. Their site is phenomenal, by the way.
Thank you.
You got vlogs there, you got videos, you've got podcasts. There's really, really some good substantive information there. So Super Joe Pardo.
200 hours of free content. Podcasting and video. So we're the podcast, I'm interviewing business owners from all over the world. You're getting business lessons. And the vlog is business lessons straight from me, shot in the realness of life.
I love the way you shoot your videos. They're so genuine. Thank you so much for being here. Time is flying. Time has flown. I want, again, Super Joe Pardo, everybody. Anything else that I missed? Any big things that are on the horizon that you want to share before we wind down the show?
I'm up for a podcasting award.
That's right.
Yeah.
When do we find out?
This upcoming Saturday.
Good luck.
So we'll see. We'll see if I win.
Well, you got a lot of people behind you. We know how awesome you are at it. Not just at the podcasting piece, but kind of pulling the whole podcasting community together. So back to kind of how we started the show. I'm glad we had an opportunity to meet.
Me too.
Thank you so much for being here. And wow, we are going to go ahead and wind down this show. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Thanks to all the sponsors for bringing the show to us today. If you have any other questions about anything that we do here, please feel free to visit our website at stagingexecs.com. Again, one last shameless plug for Joe, superjoepardo.com. Check them out. We look forward to seeing everybody again in the C-suite.
Thanks for tuning in. If you'd like to be a guest or support the show, visit stagingexecs.com for bookings and sponsorships.